What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Rain Race podcast. I'm your host, GT Rain, and somewhere in a hotel, undisclosed exactly where, my co-host off in the Esses. How are you doing tonight, Stu?
It's been a day. It's been a day. I think I can disclose the general location of where I am. I am in the greater Chicago area right now. Drove in from Toronto today, so it's been a long day, but I'm excited for this weekend. Road America is gonna be great, and yeah, just how can you not be excited? It's a racing weekend.
Well, how could you not be excited? It's your third IMSA race in a row with the trifecta of Watkins Glen, Mosport, and now over at Road America for the first time for you, correct?
This is my first time that I'll be at Road America, so yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready to do a ton of walking. I also did since I was able to drive to this one, I brought a bike as well to help get around the track a little bit more easily. So any tips that anybody has, feel free to. I'm definitely open to hearing them.
Well, I mean, I have to share some of my thoughts. I've mentioned a couple times on this podcast the most random IMSA race I've ever been to was 2021 Road America, where I just happened to be vacationing nearby and wasn't too far of a stretch to go over there. So made it out to that one. I will say Road America is probably one of, if not my favorite tracks in North America, just from a spectator standpoint. Phenomenal track. And you mentioned how much walking you're going to do. From what I remember, it actually wasn't significantly more walking than I was expecting, sort of because of the way the track loops in around itself a little bit. But having a bike there definitely wouldn't hurt you too much.
Yeah, I figure, try and explore a little bit on Thursday, despite the rain. Hopefully the rain stays away, and then decide if I'm going to need the bike for some of the weekend stuff. But super excited, and if anybody's that watches or is listening to this is also going to be there, let me know. I'd love to say hi.
Yeah, my only other tidbit for right now, carousel, outside of the carousel. Didn't really realize that just general admission spectators can get over there, but you can. At least you could in 2021. So good spot to at least try to catch some of the action.
Interesting.
Over sort of in the middle of the woods a little bit. Well, with all the Olympics going on and everything we've got going on in the world of sport right now, I decided we have to take a break from, or at least I have to take a break from watching sports that I only pretend to know what I'm talking about, and do this podcast where I know a little bit more of what's actually going on behind the scenes than I do in, say, rugby. But Gam Wolfer's in the chat sort of throwing a similar thing. Glad to see a race happening during the Olympic blackout. And yeah, IMSA's sort of a little bit on their own with that one. It seems like all of motorsports, well, we had a Formula One race this past weekend, but they're on their summer break now for the next 3-4 weeks. IndyCar's on a bit of a break. NASCAR had an off weekend with the Olympics going on. And IMSA will be sort of the standout racing action for this weekend, at least from the North American side of things. So nice for them to get a little bit of time in the spotlight. Hopefully they're able to convert that into some long-term viewers of the series, and hopefully it puts on a great show. We will be. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it is fantastic that we are going to have this on during the Olympics, especially with the lack of non-Olympic action that we have, specifically racing. It is a little bit unfortunate though that it's not going to be broadcast live, except on it'll be available on Peacock, of course, but I think it's going to be tape delayed on CNBC, if I'm not mistaken.
I will get back to that later on in the episode because I'm not sure myself, but remind me if I forget, and I will look into that. We will be previewing that race in a little bit more detail later on in this episode. We'll be giving our half-assed predictions on the spot again, which is always one of the highlights of this podcast. We got some news stories to discuss before we get around to all of that. The first thing I want to touch on is something we talked about in the last episode a little bit. The Aston Martin Valkyrie AMR-LMH, that's enough abbreviations there for you, hypercar that was out testing and continues to be out testing over in the UK right now. We first saw some on-track action from that, at least first public on-track action at Silverstone a couple of weeks back. A few days later, we saw some videos and some photos come out from Donington Park, And then a day or two after that, Aston Martin Racing officially confirmed the existence of the car on track with a press release explaining the drivers they had testing that car and just giving a quick overview of the testing that they've been doing there. Already given plenty of my thoughts on this car. Give you the highlights. Cosworth V12, naturally aspirated V12. Gonna love to hear the engine on that car. It's gonna be an absolute crowd favorite without any question of a doubt. I think the looks of the car are a bit interesting. It is a road-based hypercar. We talked about that a little bit in the past as well, being based on the Valkyrie road car. Although I think a lot more sort of prototypified, if that's a word, than some people might have been expecting, or some people might have been hoping for even. I think a lot of people, seeing that it was going to be a road car based prototype, thought that this was the first chance we had to really get a callback to some of the GT1 cars that we had back in the day, and sort of what we were not really promised, but the assumption we were running with that the hypercars would look like, being sort of these GT on steroid cars. But this car very much looks like a bespoke prototype despite having that road car lineage on it. Gave a couple thoughts about the looks of that car in the last episode as well. Over to a couple of the actual facts and not just our opinions on that car or the testing that it's been doing. 3 drivers were noted in the Aston Martin Racing press release driving that car. We had Darren Turner from Aston Martin Racing, Mario Farnbacher from the Heart of Racing, and Harry Tignell, who I believe is now a Multimatic driver, who will be a heavy partner in that program themselves. We've been sharing the testing duties so far over in the UK. Another thing I pulled out of the press release is that Aston Martin, I think for the first time, really reaffirmed their intentions to compete in both championships for next season. It's always been something that we've been assuming, but they did come out in the press release and say the Works Team Heart of Racing will enter 2 Valkyrie AMR-LMH contenders in the WEC and a single car in IMSA in 2025. I guess we're still waiting on official confirmation if that car in IMSA will be full season or if it will just be racing in the Michelin Endurance Cup, although things I've been seeing recently would point to a full season, which is absolutely fantastic. Stu, want to get some of your thoughts, though, just on what we've been seeing with that car as this continues testing?
Yeah, I mean, the video, and of course they got some actual proper images coming sort of from Aston Martin, coming out of some of those tests. It's great to see, in more detail what this car looks like, even though it is still wrapped in its camo. Man, it's getting more and more exciting seeing this car, come to life and hit the track. I think whether it is going to make it out for the IMSA test, I think it's taking place in November, I believe. It's not in December this year. So hopefully we're going to see it out on track during that time. If not, seeing it on track at Daytona for the first time in proper competition in January will suffice. It looks great. That huge rear wing on it is in stark contrast to what the what the sort of track the track road proper prototype kind of has, but man, it looks like the Valkyrie, and it sounds incredible. It's going to be a fan favorite from the moment that it hits the track, both in IMSA and the WEC.
Yeah, you said it all there yourself. Looking forward to continued testing on that car. Hopefully we see some testing in North America as we get closer to the fall and winter. I do know in the press release they had said they're planning on getting that car homologated later on this year. Of course, that'll have to go through the homologation process for both series, which involves sending it over to the wind shear wind tunnel in North Carolina for IMSA, and then over in the World Endurance Championship, sending it over to whose wind tunnel do they use?
It's a Sauber, I think.
Sauber,
and it has to be the
tunnel.
same car, if I'm not mistaken.
The exact same chassis?
I believe it has to be the same car that is sent to both.
Huh.
I believe.
I didn't know that.
Don't hold me.
I won't hold
you
to it, but
I'm
I'll
fairly
take
certain,
it at face.
I think I remember that from when Lamborghini was going through it last year.
Okay. So yeah, plenty more to come out of that program. Right now, the details are a little bit thin, but it's great to finally get, for all the people who have been saying, I'll believe that car when I see it on track, because remember, this is the first car, well, not the first car, the first car that committed to the hypercar category was Glickenhaus back in 2019. But this is the first OEM manufacturer alongside Toyota at the 2019 24 Hours of Le Mans that committed to the hypercar class with this same car. Got everybody's hopes up, and then the program was dashed, and it looked like it was going to be completely dead in the water before it even had a chance at life. And then a few years later, sure enough, the Heart of Racing sort of revives this entire program. So really looking forward to it. It's actually on track now. It's a real thing, and many great things to come out of that program.
You might say that they put some heart into it.
I'll give you that one. I'll give you that. Also, continuing on the train about prototypes, another thing we heard since the last episode a couple weeks back is Toyota. Their intentions to race their hydrogen-powered Le Mans prototype that was shown at the 24 Hours of Le Mans alongside their standard hypercar program. When the class, the hydrogen class or subclass, we're not too sure how those category of cars is going to be actually on track when they debut. The expected debut for those cars, those hydrogen-powered cars, will be around the 2028 season. I say that with a grain of salt. The initial plan for the hydrogen cars, when the convergence was first announced in 2020, right before the Rolex 24 in 2020 actually, was to have those cars on track midway through the 2024 season. It's midway through the 2024 season. We are a long way off from having those cars. It was delayed again to 2025, delayed further to 2027, and now it's 2028. Talk about things I'll believe when I see them on track. That's definitely one of them. But it is interesting to hear that from Toyota, that they are committed to having that hydrogen-powered prototype on track alongside their current hypercar program. Won't be the GR010 at that time, at least I assume it would not be the GR010 still racing in 2028, because that would be quite a long lifespan for that car. But whatever petrol combustion powered car they're racing in the series at that time will race against the hydrogen car. Other thing that we got sort of in that same story around the same time at least is that the hydrogen cars are not expected to be running a full season in 2028 for the World Endurance Championship. The main staple that we would expect to see them racing would be the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Also hearing about potential outings, further outings in 2028 from Spa and Fuji, which those two really make sense as well. Spa would be a great chance to get those cars on track at a European-based track, sort of close to home for some of the manufacturers. At least Toyota is the main one that seems committed to hydrogen right now. Just getting some track time before the big 24-hour race. And then Fuji, of course, with Toyota being committed to that program, having that car on track at their home race would be pretty big for them as well to showcase that new technology. But this is still a long way out. And again, I'm very cautious about reporting on not hypercar news, hydrogen news, because of how much it's been delayed and pushed back so far, and how much uncertainty there still is around the entire concept of it. But we do know it's coming at some point. Just big question mark is really on when.
Yeah, you could almost draw some parallels between the Aston Martin program and the hypercar or the hydrogen regulations. Being they commit to a date, they keep pushing it back, and then eventually it happens. So hopefully this will have a happy ending as well, because it would be cool to see sort of what some alternative fuel technologies look like that they're kind of outside of electric. We kind of have an idea of what electric engines, electric motors can do, although not in a proper prototype really that I can think of, kind of outside of Formula E's an open wheel car. But I'm very interested to see what hydrogen can do, and it's cool to see sort of the progression of it, with especially from Toyota in some of the cars that they've already built and raced. I believe they have a Corolla that they're racing, or that they've raced a couple times in an endurance race in Japan. But it has been good to follow some of this hydrogen news, and I do hope that it actually results in in something that we get to see on track and see what kind of a racing product it can deliver.
Yeah. I will say one thing. I think your mic cut out, or not really cut out, but it flipped to your internal mic. So I don't know if you're having trouble with those DJIs over there, which I have as well. So, but you bring up an interesting point there on, especially talking about Toyota's GT Corolla, not really GT, but their hydrogen powered Corolla that they have racing over in Japan. The interesting thing about that car is it's a hydrogen combustion car. Sort of similar to what we're seeing with any internal combustion engine car, but running on hydrogen instead of petrol or diesel or whatever fuel source they may be using. I'll be interested to see the concepts that some of these manufacturers want to bring to the table for a hydrogen powered class, because they sort of have two options they could go down. They could either try to do a hydrogen fuel cell car where it's hydrogen powering electric motors, or they could try to go down that hydrogen combustion route as well. Both of those, I think, would be very interesting options. And also, we talk about the stability that they have in sports car racing right now with the current GTP hypercar regulations being extended through the 2029 season. You have that formula covered now. So any way to attract additional manufacturers into the table, I know Hyundai has been very interested about hydrogen in the past. BMW has shown some interest in the formula as well. We already have BMW committed to the LMDH class. Hyundai is sort of getting more heavily rumored as time goes on, so we'll have to see if that ends up coming to fruition. But any opportunity to get additional manufacturers interested, and main thing is getting more cars on the grid, is something I would definitely be excited about. And also, it seems right now like this implementation of these hydrogen cars may be similar to what we saw with the introduction of the hybrids back in 2012, but 2011 we actually had the hydrogen powered, was it, who had that car? That was Hope Racing, I believe, with an Orica at Le Mans in 2011. When we saw the debut, though, the real debut of the hybrids in 2012, we saw them competing against the non-hybrid powered cars. And actually, that's sort of what we're seeing in the hypercar category right now as well, with some of the hybrid powered cars. Of course, next year you have Aston Martin joining in. That's a non-hybrid. In the past, in the WEC, we've had Glickenhaus and Van Wall. They weren't hybrid. So just getting a little bit of mixed formulas on the table there. I'd be interested to see how those cars actually compete up against the current formula of cars that we have in the hypercar and GTP classes.
Yeah, hopefully Mike is good now.
You got it.
Perfect. I agree with everything that you said, and thanks everybody for the patience hanging on here through some technical stuff.
We make it work. We make it work. Some driver news. Over to IMSA. Julian Andlau. Well, first of all, let's start this from the start. Seb Priaulx was announced last week to be leaving his driving duties in the AO Racing Porsche, Rexy, or Roxy as it will be, at the Road America weekend this weekend. As we've seen him in that role for quite a while now. He'll be replaced by Julian Andlauer, at least for Road America. Haven't officially heard if he'll be the replacement for the rest of the season, although worth noting that there are no more WEC clashes with IMSA for the rest of the season, so that's something that I at least would imagine would be possible now that he will not be doing his Proton 963 driving duties alongside IMSA. Again, not too much to say. That the main thing here is that Seb Priaulx is going to be spending his time focusing on his Multimatic testing duties. He is a Multimatic driver first, not an AO driver or a Porsche racing driver. So I'm curious what that will entail for him. I'm curious if we'll see maybe Seb Priaulx end up in the Ford Mustangs in IMSA next year. That's really my main question. Is I think he's too high caliber of a driver to just remain as a testing driver for Multimatic, and I'm really curious where we might see him racing next year.
Yeah, that was the peculiar part of this as well, is that why now is this sort of decision being made to pull Seb from the car, and yeah, maybe it is just a matter of they are just trying to ramp up for next season, or maybe I mean, we really don't know the true reason behind it, but it could be something as simple as that. I think this is going to be interesting to watch how Roxy gets on this weekend in AO Racing. They've had a very strong run of the season so far. They have multiple wins under their belt. They're leading the championship standings by a relatively healthy margin right now, and it's going to be interesting how they handle adjusting to a new driver. While also trying to manage the championship battle in what is an extremely competitive class. So Rexy, even though Julian Adlauer, an incredible driver, if you need to call in somebody to fill in for your car, this is a pretty darn good driver to get. But there is still an adjustment period for sure with new team, new driver, new track. I guess I don't know if he's raced this track in that GT3 spec car before, but regardless, Julian's going to be he's a great driver to get for that car. But it is going to be interesting to see how AO Racing gets on this weekend.
Yeah, I believe he had said it was his first time racing at Road America.
Okay.
In the actual press release that was dropped for it. Of course, has raced in IMSA though. He's raced this year. With Kelly Moss Racing over in that Porsche 911 in the GTD class. He raced with them last year as well, and raced in GTD Pro with WeatherTech Racing back in 2022. So has plenty of experience in Porsche GT cars, and like you already hit the nail saying how good of a driver he actually is and how great of a pickup he is for AO Racing. I wouldn't imagine this is going to be a huge thing for him to adapt to. I think he's shown plenty of potential in the past, and I'd just be interested to see what he's able to do for AO Racing.
Yeah, and having that, for Julian, he doesn't regularly race in IMSA. You mentioned that he did race with Kelly Moss some last season. I think he got into 6 races with them last year, and I think he was on the podium 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. So he did have a pretty good run. There we go. I think that's where I saw it as well. But having that knowledge of some of the series rules is huge because we see drivers come in, all the time, and there's small rules. There's rules differences between WEC and IMSA, what you can do on restarts, what you can do on the race start, etc. So having that knowledge already for Julian from some of his past experience is going to be big and help that adjustment just be that much smoother.
Yeah, good point there with the rules. I think that's something that always gets brought up when we're talking about endurance races, where you have some drivers who are coming over that are not frequent racers in IMSA, and will oftentimes get caught out by some of the things that are different there.
Even IMSA regulars get caught out by moving lanes before the before the start finish line, and it's there's a lot to know.
Yeah, well, twice now with GTP regulars, we've seen the weird sort of safety car full course yellow thing where a driver will get passed because they were not catching up in time. Happened at Indianapolis last year. Happened at Laguna Seca. Was it this year as well?
Yeah, it was. Yes. I think so.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll be seeing him for the first time in that AO Racing Porsche this weekend at Road America, and looking forward to seeing how he gets on there. Also, talking about another piece of driver news that we've heard since the last episode we had. Malte Jakobsen will be replacing Nico Muller over at the Peugeot squad in the World Endurance Championship next year and that 9X8 hypercar. We've talked a lot about Jakobsen in the past and the fact that he's a reserve driver for Peugeot this season. He's also had some driving over in the IMSA Championship as well. Raced for CrowdStrike APR at Daytona this year, and LMP2 finished P2 at Daytona, if I'm not mistaken. And then also racing for Dragon Speed at Sebring. His full-time gig this year, though, has been over at Cool Racing in the European Le Mans Series, and showed plenty of potential there as well. I'm pretty confident in saying he'll be the youngest driver in the hypercar category next year at only 20 years old right now. Great pickup for Peugeot. Again, he's been a reserve driver for them But finally getting the call up this year, which is great to see. I think a lot of people were disappointed that they did not put him in the car back at the Spa weekend. But finally getting that opportunity next year to show his potential in the top level of prototype machinery. Talking about Nico Muller, where is he going to end up going? Well, you might remember he was the first driver to actually be signed to the Audi LMDH program back in 2020, I believe that news would have been released. Of course, we don't need to dive into what happened with that program all too much, but made the switch over to that 9X8 program when they started in 2022. Current rumors right now would suggest that he's off to becoming a Porsche factory driver next year. Whether that puts him in GT3 machinery or whether we see him in a 963 somewhere, I imagine there are going to be some 963 seats that are going to be open for next season that he could slot into pretty nicely. But not too sure on that 100%. That's not a guarantee. That's just something that I would imagine will be on the cards for him next year. Go ahead.
I was gonna mention something about you mentioned Malte or Malte. I honestly
I've always said Malte Jakobsen. Sort of rolls off the tongue that way.
It does.
I might be wrong.
We're probably all wrong. Let's be honest. You mentioned that I think he will be the youngest. I think in the WEC. In IMSA though, Tijmen van der Helm is Tiemann. Yeah.
We're horrible at
this. Here we go. He's about 4 months younger. So okay. It's both young guns, both a 2003 and a 2004 birthday. The drivers are very young.
Well, unless a bombshell story drops that Peugeot is racing in IMSA next year or JDC is racing in the World Endurance Championship, then I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of crossover between the two of them, at least in that top-level hypercar / GTP category. But
maybe we'll see Connor Zilic get a ride in one of those and just blow those ages, out of the water.
Well, hopefully. But you know what? Connor Zilic needs to be in an LMP2 car at Le Mans first. I'm not too concerned with exactly what he's driving, but I know he's very interested in racing at Le Mans. He might have said that on this podcast.
Let's be real. Who wouldn't be?
Yeah. For him to say that was a bucket list race for him, though, at the age he's at with the potential he has, especially since it seems like he's sort of going down the NASCAR route a little bit right now, racing full season in ARCA. That was a little bit surprising to hear that Le Mans was his bucket list race. But we're not talking about Connor Zilic right now. We're talking about Malte Jakobsen and Tijmen van der Helm and all the other young guns that are racing in prototypes in 2024/25. So, you know what? I think I breezed through the news stories that I had for this week. Actually, I say that. It's been 29 minutes so far in this episode. We should get on to a not GTP. Got to focus on what I'm saying here. Got to get on to an IMSA at Road America preview for this weekend. I touched on that at the beginning of the episode. If you do have any questions, though, I noticed there's been some questions already. I'm going to cycle back to all of those at the end of the episode. But if there's anything you want to ask, just get those in, and we'll try to hit as many of those as possible. But it's an IMSA weekend. I always just toss the baton to you, sort of in the way that we would if we were doing a 4x400 relay in the Olympics, and let you take the lead with IMSA stuff.
All right, the baton is passed to me. Hopefully, I'm not cutting out here at all. But of course, we're at Road America. This is round 8 for the IMSA season. Of course, not all the classes have been present at every single race. We have now had each class miss at least one race, with GTP missing out last round at CTMP. So it's great to see them back on the docket this weekend. And of course, we're at Road America. It's a 4-mile or 6.5 kilometer long track, 14 turns. And, this is a track that is loved by many fans, drivers, teams. It's iconic in the North American sports car racing scene. So it's absolutely fantastic to be here or to be heading to Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, for the yearly trip. Of course, if you ask many fans, then I think this is one of the rounds that they would like to see, or many people would like to see be made an endurance round, maybe over the 6 hours of Indy, but we can't always get what we want. There are a couple of big notes going into this weekend, and we touched on a couple of them there with especially Seb Priaulx being sort of removing himself or taking a step back from the AO Racing ride, and Julian Andlauer coming in. There is another driver swap that's taking place, and that is the number 45 Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Lamborghini. Kyle Marcelli is having to take this race off as he's developed thoracic outlet syndrome. So that's going to be preventing him from racing this round. Filling in his spot to go along with Danny Formal is going to be Sandy Mitchell, Lamborghini factory driver. So he has experience here from the Super Trofeo days, does a lot of racing, I believe, in British GT right now, and is a great driver. So keep an eye on that number 45. A couple of other notes are we're missing the Andretti Porsche in the GTD ranks. I believe that is Andretti Racing, if I'm not mistaken, is the team. Jared Andretti. Were you going to say something there?
Well, I was going to say it's a little bit confusing, Andretti's programs in GT and IMSA, because they have the Aston, and then they have the Porsche, and then they have the prototypes with Acura as well. So
yeah, but these are two different operations. The Andretti Global is who's partnered with Wayne Taylor, and then this is, I think it's Andretti Racing or something like that. But regardless, they are not on the grid. We do see MDK return to the grid. They were absent for the CTMP round in the GTD class. And a real notable omission here is the 04 CrowdStrike Racing entry. Of course, George Kurtz being the CEO of CrowdStrike and everything that has gone on with them in recent weeks, it hasn't been a good little run. They had to miss a GT World Challenge America race at VIR a couple weeks ago, right when that big outage was happening. So George Kurtz and CrowdStrike Racing will not be present, but picking up sort of that, we lose one entry at LMP2 and we gain another one back because JDC Miller Motorsports is going to be entering an LMP2 car in that class once again. So we're still going to have a 12 car grid there. What else do we got here? I know there have also been there's been some interesting news around one of the support series that's in the IMSA paddock, the Porsche Carrera Cup North America. We're seeing some driver swaps there with one team, MDK actually having to withdraw some of their entries due to a sponsorship dispute, but that has just led to Era Motorsports, who fields an LMP2 car. They won the Rolex 24 and the Sebring 12. They are going to be back, or they're going to be joining the Porsche Carrera Cup North America grid, running 3 cars. And then the last note that I had for this weekend, and I missed this when I was talking about additional cars on it, is we're going to have a Ferrari in the GTD Pro class this weekend. Conquest Racing will be bringing the number 35 Ferrari 296 to the grid. They're still going to be running the number 34 in the GTD class, but they're going to be adding the 35 for the GTD Pro class. Now this is always a fun race. There's always some great racing that takes place here. I was looking at the number of full course yellows that we've seen in recent years. There is a tendency to see some full course yellows, cars getting stuck, well off track, or there's a couple troublesome spots on this track. But what are some things that you're going to be looking for in this race, or do you have anything in particular that you're looking forward to at Road America?
Well, I was just right now looking up the weather for the race, actually, because I know that's played a factor here many a times. And it looks
It's
like
supposed to
they're,
be good.
yeah, it's supposed to be good this weekend. Might get some scattered thunderstorms over on Thursday for the initial on-track action, but um, yeah, that doesn't look like it's going to be a concern like it might have been previous years.
Now,
Yeah,
it is worth noting, I think we're supposed to get a bunch of rain earlier. So I think on Wednesday there might be a storm that's going through. And whenever you get those storms that go through before the race weekend gets underway, the water doesn't always drain right away. So that could cause problems if drivers are having offs in practice. But again, practice, at least it's in practice and not during the race.
yeah. So as you said, Road America definitely should be an endurance race. I would love to see this back as a 4-hour enduro that we had seen back in the American Le Mans series. But I'll digress on that one. It is a high-speed track, and you'll see that sort of influence my picks when I explain those a little bit later on. I think that there's potential to see some new names on if the podium, if not actually fighting for the class wins here, which I'm very excited to see. It's the return of the GTP class for the first time since Watkins Glen, which was only 2 races ago, but feels like a while ago at this point. I guess it's been over a month now since we've seen GTP cars on track in IMSA. Yeah, I think we're on for a good one.
I think so, and the championship standings kind of are in some of the classes at least are a reflection of in some of the classes they are a reflection of how close things have been. In other classes, they have been a bit of a runaway. But to quickly touch on those in the GTP class, that is one of the classes where things could be very interesting this weekend. The number 7 Porsche Penske Motorsports 963 leads there by 93 points over the 0-1 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac. So 93 points, that is definitely, you can make up a significant portion of that in a race weekend, and the 7's going to want to make sure they stay out of trouble. But there's only 3 rounds left for the prototype classes, so you do not want to, if you're the 0-1 or the 6 Porsche that's 132 points behind, you definitely don't want to see that gap get any larger coming out of this weekend. The number 40 Wayne Taylor Racing Acura and the 31 Cadillac round out the top 5 there. We do get a really good battle here in LMP2, though. Here, it's the number 74 Riley Motorsports entry, who finished second at CTMP. They have 1,308 points, and that's 12 points is all you have to go back to find the number 52 Inter-Europol by PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry. Of course, they won last time out at CTMP. And then the 18 Era Motorsports, the number 22 United, and the number 11 TDS Racing entry round out the top 5 there. In GTD Pro, touched on it with Roxy this weekend, and AO Racing. They lead by 98 points over the Heart of Racing Aston Martin. So, they want to have a solid race. There's going to be some adjustments that they're going to have to make with Julian, but they're going to be looking to just have another solid race like they did at CTMP. The number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus is 120 points back, and the number 3 Corvette and number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW round out the top 5. And then we don't have to talk much about GTD. It is a runaway. It's not very close here at the front. The 57 Windward Racing Mercedes leads by 340 points there over the number 96 Turner Motorsports BMW.
Yeah. Getting ready to almost to wrap up. Actually, so we talked about that last episode. They're not quite a full weekend ahead yet. I think they're just barely shy of that with it would be 350 for the race win and 35 for the pole.
385, yeah.
Yeah.
But the difference, I think I calculated the difference for the GTD ranks, and it was like, I think it's a 200 and some point swing. So they're almost, as long as they start the next 2 races, it's almost a 2-race lead. Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So we'll see how that may or may not influence my predictions, which actually might be a good chance to start going over some of those. mentioned that this is the return of the GTP class. We haven't seen these cars on track in IMSA for a good month now, a little over a month. To say it pretty plain and simple, I think this is a track that's going to favor Porsche. We've seen that they've been strong in IMSA this year at the high-speed tracks. It was really down to them versus Cadillac at Daytona. Porsche just ended up being a little bit quicker in those daytime running conditions at the finish, and ultimately gave them the victory there. I think this is going to be a similar story. I'm not just saying that because it's a high-speed track. You just called a gut feeling that I think this is going to be largely between Porsche and Cadillac. I've had a sort of a joking trend at this point in time of picking the 31 this entire season because, or not the entire season, but at least the last handful of races, because they've just been knocking on the door for a while, and then, or at least the first few races of the season, they were really knocking on the door, just falling barely short with some second place finishes. They had the fastest car at Sebring this year. The past two races, they haven't been quite as strong. And I really would like to pick them as a winner here at Road America. But in the interest of just testing science and testing out if I don't pick them and if they win, that would be very funny. I'm going to go with not the championship leading Porsche 963 from Penske, but I'm going to go with the number 6 in the GTP class, trying to reel in some points on the sister car. You mentioned they are a little ways back right now. It's 1,912 points compared to 2,044 from the number 7 car. This is a good opportunity for them to try to get some points back on that sister car and pick up their first win since Laguna Seca this year.
Man, that is exactly who I was going with. I heard you narrow it down from the Cadillac to the Porsche. And I'm like, don't pick the 6. And then you pick the 6. Okay, I'm going to pivot then, and we're going to prove the theory that it is you all along, and I'm going to go with the 31 Cadillac to take the win there. So if they don't take it, then we'll know it's me. At least
that's fine.
Get some closure.
That's fine. You know what? I'll throw this entire predictions out the window if that holds true. Any other thoughts, though, on the GTP category? Andrew's over in the chat saying BMW supremacy. I would love to see BMW finally put one through this season. They've been strong at a couple of races this year. I said they were going to be strong at Long Beach. They were pretty quick there, but didn't have the race fall the way that they would have hoped. I don't know. I just see this being a track that's not going to favor that car all that well.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that it doesn't seem like it'll favor the car all that well, but you never know. This would be the exact weekend that they would pull something like this out. So maybe we should be keeping an eye on the BMWs. Maybe Andrew has an inside scoop.
Tell us if we're wrong, Andrew. LMP2, plenty of good options here. Talked about the loss of CrowdStrike Racing while they deal with more pressing matters, at least in terms of George Kurtz. Here, it's a little bit more difficult to think about, but I got a gut feeling on the 52 PR1, Inter-Europol PR1 Mathiasen car. Nick Boole and Tom Dillman, I think that they've got a good opportunity here this weekend. We'll just have to see if they're able to convert a second race win in a row. They won last time out at Mosport, and just keep the good races rolling for them as they try to close in that championship lead, which is actually pretty close for the LMP2 top 2 between the number 74 Riley Motorsports Orica and the 52 PR1.
Yeah, just 12 points difference there, so it's a close battle. Thankfully, you didn't take my pick here, but you went with the team that won last year, the 52. That team did take the win at Road America last year, but I'm going to be going with one of the drivers that won here last year, and that's Ben Keating and Ben Hanley in the number 2 United Autosports entry. It's been an underwhelming year for them so far. I don't think they are going to deny that. But I think they're going to turn it around at some point, and I have a good feeling about them this weekend.
Yeah. Over in GTD Pro, I'll let you start first. I don't want to put myself at risk of stealing another one of your picks.
All right. Well, maybe Well, yeah, we'll see. If hopefully I'm not stealing yours, because I'm going with the car that won here last year. And the team that won here last year in the pro class, that is the number 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, Ross Gunn, and I believe Alex Riberas is in the car this weekend. I thought for a moment it might have been Farnbacher, but I think that may have just been for the clash races with the where the WEC was running.
Yep, you're right.
Okay, perfect. So the number 23, they won at Watkins Glen, albeit maybe you could argue that it was a bit of a lucky win. The Corvette probably deserved that, or at least they had to come in and pit on the second to last lap for fuel. But they got a little bit lucky at Watkins Glen, but those Aston Martins have been improving over the last few rounds. Of course, their sister entry, the number 27, was victorious in the GTD class at CTMP. So they are starting to show some pace. This is a really strong team, really strong drivers in a really competitive class. But give me the 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin.
Yeah. I'll let you take that one because I've got a completely different pick. There's been two manufacturers in the GT ranks and IMSA have been surprising me the past couple of races. The first one being Corvette. They really turned their season around, seems like, after Le Mans this year, and that return to IMSA. Nearly won Watkins Glen with a number 4 car, won at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park last time out with a number 3. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them continue that momentum, but I also think it's going to be the other manufacturer that's impressed me recently on top, which has been Ford. I talked earlier about how this is a high-speed track, and I think the Ford this year has been particularly well at some of those high-speed circuits. They've really been knocking on the door the past few races that we've seen from them. Reliability doesn't really seem like it's a concern for that car anymore. They're still trying to get on the podium in IMSA, let alone finding a race win, but they've been getting very close. 5th place over at Watkins Glen, a 4th place last race out at Mosport. I think this is a real good chance for them to finally get a win for that car for the first time in global competition, because that car has not won worldwide yet. And what a place to do it, not too far from Ford's global headquarters over in Detroit.
That's true. That's a solid pick for. That was GTA Pro. Do you have a specific car? The 64 or the 65?
Yeah, I didn't give you a specific car. I didn't really think about that. It could be a toss-up, but I'll just say that the 64 has been doing a little bit better than the 65 recently, so I'll just let momentum carry them to the race win here at Road America.
Yeah, I mean, this is a solid pick. You mentioned that they have been improving a lot over the past couple of races at CTMP. They were in the battle for a podium spot there. They just faded kind of right at the end of that race. Couldn't quite keep up with. Nobody could keep up with the Corvettes, but and then Rexy was able to get around them there. So that's a really good choice there.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question for GTD. Are you picking anybody apart from the 57 Windward?
I am.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
It should be illegal. We should make a rule that we can't pick the 57. Or actually, maybe with our luck, maybe that will stop the winning. But I am going to go with one of the other Mercedes that are in the GTD class, and that's the number 32 Corthoff Preston Motorsports Mercedes of Michael Grenier and Kenton Cook. Mercedes has been very strong at this track over the past few years. I believe 2 years ago, Windward won here at this track in a Mercedes. That was as far back as I looked for research, so I'm sure there's been others. But this is a track that kind of suits the Mercedes characteristics. Mercedes is strong at tracks like Daytona. So I think there are some similarities here with the high-speed nature of Road America. Give me the number 32, who have yet to score a win this season, but are quietly sitting third in the championship points. So give me them to pick up their first win of the season this weekend.
Okay. I'm shameless. I'm picking the 57. It's been a whole 2 races since they've won. They're really due another win, so I'm gonna take the easy one out here. It's the only time I'll do it, I promise. But just give me the 57 for this race, and if they don't win, then I'll stick to my my thoughts that I just truly can't pick. Well, actually, again, I've done okay with the GT picks in the past. It's really just GTP that I can't ever seem to stick. But we'll test if the curse really exists.
I think you've had a lot better results. Maybe we should go back and look at these at some point, but I think you've had a lot better results with your picks than I have.
Yeah. Well, I'm just throwing darts at a board. I mean, surely one of them's going to stick. You're just, sometimes you got to pick the people who might not seem likely, and then ultimately they're the ones who come out on top. Do a little bit of reverse psychology there. Any other things you want to discuss for this upcoming Road America weekend before we switch over to some questions?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you had a bold prediction for this weekend, because I know we like to do
bonus sort of pick, huh?
Yeah, the bonus or the bold prediction. Yeah.
I haven't given this one any thought. Do you have one first?
I do.
Am I able to just throw you on the spot? Go ahead.
Yeah, so mine's kind of covered by your picks, but I do think that this was going to be the track where Ford picked up at least their first podium in IMSA this season, whether it be in the GTD Pro class or in GTD with the number 55 Mustang there. So Ford has looked very strong. This should be a track that suits them. And I'm going to be keeping a close eye on all three of those Fords this weekend because much like you could kind of see Corvette turn the corner a few races ago, it kind of looks like Ford is starting to turn that corner. And I think it's only a matter of time before they break through and get a really good result.
Yeah. I'll accept that one. Sort of like you said, goes along with mine. I just with a 45 seconds of thought I've given it. The car that's sort of sitting as a quiet contender in the GTP Championship this year, haven't talked about them for a while now. Haven't talked about them since their win, really, at Sebring, if that gives it away. The number 40 Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Global Acura GTP. I've talked numerous times on this podcast about how their lack of consistency hurts their chances to win championships because they've been runner-up in the championship for like 5 years in a row now, something like that. I do think this car still has a chance. They're going to need to have a really good weekend here at Road America, though. You already mentioned that there's only 3 races left for these prototypes. I think the number 40 car, I'm not going to say that they're my pick to win because I already didn't pick them. But I don't think a lot of people have been talking about Acura recently. If they can pick up a nice P2 here, especially if the number 7 Porsche has a rough day, they can claw back some of those points. And I think the last 2 races of the season, IMS and Road Atlanta, are going to be tracks that really favor that car a lot better. So if they can have a good weekend here, I think that puts them in the picture a lot more for the championship than we might be talking about right now. Yeah,
that is a good point. That's a good point. They have been kind of quietly going about their business, and we did see the Meyershank Racing Acura have a strong run here right at the end, especially at the end of the race last year. If there had been a few more laps on the end of last year's race, that we very well may have seen. I think Tom Blomqvist was in for that closing stint. We very well may have seen a non-Porsche victory last year. So. The Acura is kind of a good sneaky dark horse pick. And before we move on, I do also want to actually mention the privateer Porsches as well. It's been a full year now that Proton has been on the GTP grid. They're returning to a track, for the first time with that car, which is probably a good feeling for them to at least have some data on it. Proton is the only privateer entry that we've seen get a podium so far in IMSA. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on those 2 cars as well. Of course, Proton and JDC Miller Motorsports. We know that Porsche was strong here last year. We saw that, and we're probably going to see it again. And I think that they could be on for a sneaky good race if things can fall their way a little bit.
Yeah, well, Proton was an early favorite at Watkins Glen, a real surprise there. So
true.
It's difficult to sometimes talk about those privateers and the impact that they have. They haven't been quite as impactful in the GTP class in terms of raw finishing results as they were in DPI. But like you mentioned, they're definitely always there as quiet contenders, so I would never rule them out entirely.
Yeah, and especially if we do get, a full course yellow that comes in at an opportune time, they catch strategy the right way, then they could definitely be in the run here when this one's all said and done.
Yeah. Going over to some of the questions that were asked in the chat. Somebody asked about our who we thought would be the strongest team heading into the weekend in GTP. I guess our picks already would have covered that. Did you have any other teams that you think are going to be particularly strong this weekend over in the GTP class that we haven't touched on yet?
No, I think. I mean, the
Well,
other
we've hit half the grid at this point because
yeah.
we've covered Wheel and Engineering, we've covered Wayne Taylor Racing, we've covered the Porsches, we've covered
I guess
the
we hate
privateer
Chip Ganassi,
Porsches.
maybe.
Yeah, Chip Ganassi's gonna
Sorry.
win now. Just watch.
Yeah, that's what's gonna happen. No,
Um,
I can't think of anything else. My sort of dark horses in GTP, I think, are the privateers. I think they could have a strong weekend here, considering how the Porsches got on last year.
yeah. A couple people are talking about the Aston Valkyrie Le Mans hypercar. 24 hours of a naturally aspirated V12 on the Daytona banks is worth the price of travel, hotel, and ticket alone. I agree with that 100%. And I have gone on record of saying that if that car is at the Daytona test in November, despite the fact that that is a closed test, I will do everything in my power to get out to that event and try to bring some coverage of that car, because I think that I've already said it plenty of times. Most exciting prototype, or at least one of the most exciting prototypes I think we've had in prototype racing in a long time. And we haven't had a V12 powered prototype since Aston Martin themselves, back around 10 years ago with that Lola powered V12 Aston. And also Rolex 24 next year, as long as nothing unexpected happens. Pretty much already a sealed and done deal for me, at least, attending that race. So I'll agree with that statement
here as well.
Yeah. Interesting thing with Aston is them being the first serious OEM with funding behind them going the non-hybrid route. Hope it works out for them. Yeah, I think that's something that's been talked about. There's been a lot of people who have been saying, "Oh, this car won't have a chance. It's not a hybrid." Look at what happened last year with Glickenhaus and Van Wall. They were really nowhere without a hybrid. Like you said here, this is the first proper OEM that we've had that hasn't gone down that hybrid route. So did Glickenhaus and Van Wall struggle because they didn't have a hybrid, or did they struggle because they weren't a top budget OEM? Or is it a little bit of both? Those are the questions that are going to be answered next year, I think. Although I wouldn't put too much weight on how the car handles in the first half of the season. I think this car is going to be 2 years behind the GTP cars. It's going to be even more years behind, unless Toyota brings a new car next year, behind what we're seeing from Toyota and IMSA and WEC, behind what we're seeing from, well, Peugeot kind of has a new car, but it's an evolution of a car that's been on track since 2022. So there's going to be a lot of people who have a big advantage on them from the start. So I don't think it's going to be fair to read into their results at Daytona, or really the first half of the season next year. I think after that, maybe after a full season, is really when we'd start to see some competitive results out of that car. But then also interesting to see how that car fares in both championships, because I think that the pace that we see from them in one championship is not necessarily going to be representative of how they do in the other, despite the fact that you have the same team backing both of those programs. Sort of seeing a similar story with Lamborghini and IMSA.
Yeah, and it's also going to be interesting to see. This is going to be the first hypercar that IMSA is going to have to BOP. Of course, right now the entire GTP class is just LMDH entries, so adds a bit of a wrinkle there as well. I think that IMSA's done a great job of balancing everything GTP wise so far, and I'm sure they're gonna take this on and do a great job with it. But it is going to be something to keep an eye on, because I'm sure that I don't know much on the BOP process, but I'm sure that it adds some pretty significant wrinkles that they're going to have to sort out. So
It's another piece in the puzzle, if nothing else. It's
Yeah.
another variable that they have to account for. I've also seen a lot of people saying this car being a V12, there's a reason why we don't see V12 prototypes in racing much anymore, and it's because they're inherently unreliable compared to like a V6 or a V8, which is the much more common format that we see out of these prototypes. I'm very interested in this engine in particular, being that Cosworth V12 that is essentially a tuned version of what we see in the road-going Valkyrie, which revs out to 11,000 RPM. It generates like 1,000 brake horsepower. What we're going to see in IMSA and the WEC is a heavily down-tuned version of that engine. Don't know exactly what they're going to let it rev out to. It won't be 11,000 RPM, I can promise you that much. And it's only going to be putting out only around 650, 675 horsepower, give or take in that range. So given the fact that it's down-tuned that heavily, I'm just sort of curious how that car is going to handle on the reliability front. Although I would have to imagine that they're fairly confident, just on the basis of that is an engine that has a lot of miles on it already, just not necessarily in this exact place, for lack of a better word, and in the race car at least.
Yeah, that is a good point. That it'll be interesting to see how that engine fares. But I mean, we've been pretty fortunate in terms of I guess the only cars that have really been unreliable in the GTP/hypercar ranks have been, some of the privateer entries really last year, right? We haven't seen too many reliability issues. Well, I guess apart from Alpine at Le Mans this year as well.
That's the big one. The interesting thing about reliability is that there's been small issues, but nothing really catastrophic. I mean, the one thing that set Alpine apart this year at Le Mans is just how visible that engine failure was. I mean, this isn't something that cost them a few laps or 20 minutes in the pits or in the garage. This was something that was on full display, at least for one of the cars. Seeing smoke pour out of the engine. And that was the first real visible example that we had of that, at least from one of the OEM prototype manufacturers. So sort of see what you're saying there. Thoughts? Go ahead.
I guess we've seen some hybrid issues, but yeah.
Right. But those are sort of low profile, though. Yeah. Thoughts on Meyershank Racing coming back and Wayne Taylor Racing going back to Cadillac? I've touched on this a little bit before. I think Meyershank Racing, if I'm going to say the quiet part out loud, I think Meyershank Racing was a stronger team with that Acura than Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti has been. Just look at their results in the GTP. Actually, just look at their results in the DPI era as well, when the two of them were competing against each other in Acura machinery. I do question how they're going to handle a 2-car program next year, because that would be the first time that Meyershank Racing would be running 2 cars. Well, not entirely in sports car racing history, but the first time in the modern prototype machinery that we have being DPI/GTP. So I think they're going to be pretty strong. They have plenty of experience in sports car racing. I have no doubts that they're going to have a very strong driver lineup there as well. And I think they're probably honestly, just given what we've seen from the past, I think they're Acura's best bid at securing a GTP championship. And in terms of Wayne Taylor Racing going back to Cadillac, that's a partnership that really went pretty well for them. You want to talk about dominance in prototype racing. Wayne Taylor Racing back at the beginning of the 2017 season, the intro season of the DPI category, they were just extremely dominant with that car at the beginning of the year, and had a couple championship runs with that car as well. I think it's a move that's going to fare out pretty well for both manufacturers, and I'm excited to see how both of them end up doing. I think the cars that we've seen both from Cadillac in IMSA right now and also Acura in IMSA may not be run to their absolute true potential, and maybe there are teams out there that are able to give those manufacturers a better run for their money, and I think that's what we're going to see next year.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you said. I really think that since Meyer Shank joined the ranks in DPI, when was it that Penske left? Was it 2021 that they joined DPI? I think.
I believe
Or
so.
is it 20? Yeah. Ever since they joined the DPI ranks again in sort of this top class, you could put a very strong argument forward that they were the best team that operated in that time frame, in that top class. They won they won a championship. They've won multiple Rolex 24s. I think, yeah, they won. Yeah, they won multiple for sure. They've had a ton of wins over that time. They've developed some really strong drivers. They deserve to be back in the sport. It's great to see them back in IMSA. It's kind of ironic that it's with Acura again. But two-car operation there. I think they're going to do a great job with that, and really going to be interesting to see the how the driver lineups shape up over there. There's all sorts of questions surrounding, are the Taylor brothers, are they contracted to Acura? Are they going to be staying with Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti? These are all things that we don't have insight into yet, and is going to be what we're going to have to watch for as the summer rolls on. So, and then of course, as for Wayne Taylor Racing, they're regarded as one of the top teams on the IMSA grid, just period. They've been in the sport for so long. They've won so much and then partnering up with Andretti as well, and getting that additional support there. The switch back to Cadillac, I don't think they're going to really miss much there. And we know that they've won with Cadillac in the past. They've won a lot of races and championships with them. So I think this is really a win-win-win. It's a win for both of the teams, and it's a win for us as the fans to see how this is all shaken out. It's maybe the best case scenario, unless if you're Chip Ganassi Racing or a Chip Ganassi Racing fan.
Well, and that was exactly what I was going to bring up. The only person in this scenario who's really losing out would be Chip Ganassi Racing, and I think their name has been thrown around recently with the Hyundai LMDH rumors that have been cycling around. Now, whether or not that program actually comes to fruition and then Chip Ganassi Racing is actually fronting that effort still remains to be seen. But if they end up securing that program and that program does exist, then I think it's a real winner all around the board. And there's plenty of, as you mentioned, there's plenty of driver shakeups still to be seen over the off season. Plenty of questions related to who's going to be going where. We still have that open seat in the 31 Cadillac right now with the departure of Pipo Derani. Still not sure where Derani is going to end up next year. So there's a lot to cover still coming up into the off season for IMSA this year.
Yeah, the silly season is just getting underway.
Yeah, we just only scratched the surface, really. I think that's it for questions, so I think that's enough for an episode. I want to give the floor back to you, though, see if there's any other closing thoughts you want to mention as you get ready to head out to Road America this weekend.
Yeah, in terms of closing thoughts, I think this has been one of the races that you have circled on the IMSA calendar. I was going to say for the past few years, but I think just whenever Road America is on the calendar, you're always circling it. It's such an iconic track. It's going to be a lot of fun to see how the GTPs sort of carry some of the summer momentum through into this race. See if Porsche can, keep up their strong run that they've had, and see how these championships shake out, because there are only 3 races left in the GTP and LMP2 championships. So this is really a big race for them. This is the last Sprint Cup, the last sprint race that they have this season. It's just endurance races from here on out for those prototypes. So this is a really big weekend for them to really position themselves in the championship for the final 2 races. So we might see some bold strategies, and hopefully that we do. And I think we're going to see a great race on Sunday.
Yeah, I think you really brought a good point there. The championship, at least in the GTP category, now that I'm looking at the standings, is still pretty open between the top 5. You could make an argument that it's going to take quite a bit for the 31 Whelen Cadillac Racing car to actually find their way to the top of the championship, but stranger things have happened. We got those 2 endurance races left, and there's plenty of things that can unfold in those enduros. We got 16 hours of racing between Indianapolis and Road Atlanta alone, still to unpack. But this is going to be a big race, like you said. If the number 7 car pulls out of this race with their second win in a row, it's going to be a lot more of a clear path to the championship for them. So for everybody else, this is their race that they have to win. With that in mind, I'll leave it at that. We'll be back hopefully next Tuesday for another episode to recap everything that we've seen on track at Road Atlanta. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to watching some sports that I don't know too much about. Maybe we'll try some handball tonight. I saw water polo was on earlier. Maybe I'll try to figure out that one a little bit more. But then this weekend, tune into some streaming if you want to see some live IMSA coverage at Road America. And we'll be back next week to unpack all of it. Thank you so much for tuning into tonight's episode. Hope to catch you all next week. Have a good night. Take care.